A millionaire real estate mogul walks into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom wearing a $5,000 designer outfit, and within 60 seconds, she makes a statement so insulting, so breathtakingly disrespectful that even seasoned court officers freeze in shock. What happens next isn't just a court ruling. It's a masterclass in why wealth cannot shield you from accountability and why some insults demand absolute justice. The courtroom felt different that morning. The kind of quiet where you could hear every breath, every shuffle of a paper. It was 9:30 a.m., and Judge Frank Caprio was ready to begin another day of hearings. Fair, calm, and respectful, as always. But no one knew that the woman about to walk through those doors would turn this ordinary morning into a lesson that millions would never forget. Her name was Victoria Ashford, 52 years old, owner of several luxury properties, known for her confidence and her arrogance. She didn't just enter the courtroom, she owned it, or at least she thought she did. Dressed in a sharp Valentino suit, her diamond earrings sparkled brighter than her respect for the law. In her hand was a phone, glowing with unread messages she clearly believed were more important than anyone in that room. The bailiff leaned toward Judge Caprio and whispered softly, "Your Honor, this defendant has been difficult." She was rude to the staff and demanded a reschedule for her business call. Judge Caprio only nodded. He'd seen all kinds of people, the kind, the nervous, the angry, but arrogance in a courtroom was always the hardest to handle. Still, his calm voice carried across the room. "Miss Ashford, good morning. Please step forward." Victoria barely looked up from her phone. Her steps were slow, her posture bold, her eyes uninterested. To her, this was just another meeting, one she didn't want to attend. "Miss Ashford, please put away your phone," Judge Caprio said politely. Victoria finally looked up and replied with an icy smile. "It's Miss Ashford, not Mrs. I didn't marry for a name, Your Honor. I built my own empire." The words sliced through the courtroom air. She wasn't answering a judge. She was declaring superiority. She slipped her phone into her handbag, not out of respect, but because she chose to. Judge Caprio nodded slightly, keeping his calm tone. "Miss Ashford, you are here regarding a red light violation on Benefit Street. How do you plead?" Victoria sighed. "Look, I'm managing a $12 million deal right now. Can we expedite this? I have actual important matters waiting." The word actual hit the room like thunder. People glanced at each other. A man in the back shook his head. Even a court reporter stopped typing for a second. She had just told a judge that his work, that the law itself, was not important. Judge Caprio's voice stayed gentle, but new firmness appeared. "Miss Ashford, these proceedings are important. They concern public safety." But Victoria wasn't finished. "A red light, Your Honor? Do you know how many jobs I create? How much tax I pay? My developments bring life to this city. This citation is beneath me." That one sentence, "beneath me," made the entire room stiffen. Everyone felt it. Pride, arrogance, disrespect. It was all there in her tone. Judge Caprio opened the file calmly. "Miss Ashford, the law applies equally to everyone, no matter how successful." She smirked. "With respect, Your Honor, in the real world, everything has a price. Just tell me the fine. My assistant will handle it." Now, even the quietest corners of the courtroom trembled with disbelief. Victoria had just reduced justice to a transaction, and she didn't even realize she had awakened something powerful in the room, a truth she would soon regret ignoring. The judge glanced down at her record. 6 prior violations in 3 years. All paid, none attended. 2 for speeding, 3 for running red lights, 1 for reckless driving. She treated the law like a parking meter. Drop a coin, move on. Judge Caprio looked up. "Miss Ashford, this is not just another fine. It's a pattern. You've repeatedly chosen to ignore the law." Victoria laughed softly, a cold, hollow laugh. "Warnings, fines, it's all just part of doing business, Judge. Everyone wins." That moment changed everything. The respect in the room turned to outrage. People whispered. A veteran in the back folded his arms, eyes narrowed. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor stood and added, "Your Honor, this red light violation happened in a school zone during dismissal hours. A man was nearly hit. The words echoed. School zone. Elderly pedestrian. Near miss. A hush fell. For a heartbeat, the courtroom went utterly still. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his voice firm now. Miss Ashford, you ran a red light in front of school. A pedestrian almost lost his life. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. That school zone causes chaos. And if the man was in the crosswalk while my light was red, he was jaywalking. The collective gasp was almost physical. Mothers, fathers, young people. Everyone looked at her as if she'd confessed to something far worse than a traffic offense. Judge Caprio's voice cut through the tension. He was not jaywalking. He had the right of way. You broke the law. But Victoria only smiled thinly, as if she still had control. With all due respect, Your Honor, this is a waste of my time. I run a $40 million company. I employ hundreds. I contribute more than most people here will earn in a lifetime. So yes, I ran a red light. Let's move on. The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Everyone knew what had just happened. She had disrespected not only the judge, but every person in that courtroom who worked hard to live honestly. Then she said the words that would make her name unforgettable. You sit here, stamping papers, collecting a government paycheck. You've probably never signed the front of a check in your life, only the back. The courtroom froze. The bailiff stepped forward instinctively. A veteran in the gallery stood up, his face burning red. And for the first time that morning, Judge Caprio's warmth vanished. He looked directly at her. His voice, low but steady, carried the weight of 1,000 judgments. Miss Ashford, did you just tell this court that my service to the law is meaningless? Victoria didn't blink. I'm saying we live in different worlds, Your Honor. In mine, results matter. Productivity matters. This courtroom slows down people who actually make a difference. Judge Caprio rose from his seat, something he rarely did. And when he did, it meant the storm was coming. Miss Ashford, you've just shown the most profound disrespect I've seen in 38 years on this bench. From the audience, a hand lifted. Your Honor, an elderly man said, May I speak? The judge nodded gently. Please state your name, sir. Robert Chin, United States Army, Korea. I've lived in Providence 52 years. His voice trembled with emotion, but his words hit like truth. This judge has shown me respect every single time I stood here. He helps people who have nothing. He listens. You think money makes you better, but you don't even understand kindness. The courtroom erupted in applause. Real applause. From people tired of arrogance and hungry for decency. Judge Caprio lifted his hand, calming the room again. His eyes returned to Victoria. Miss Ashford, I'll give you one chance to apologize. But she couldn't. Pride chained her tongue. Apologize? For speaking truth? Respect is earned, Judge. You don't earn it by judging people who actually build things. And that was her final mistake. Judge Caprio's eyes hardened. Then this court will show you what earned respect truly looks like. The camera zoomed in, the tension like electricity in the air. Everyone knew the story was far from over, that the lesson was just beginning. The air inside the courtroom had changed. The warmth was gone. The laughter had faded. Even the fluorescent lights seemed colder now. Judge Caprio stood quietly for a moment, his hands resting on the bench, his eyes locked on Victoria Ashford, the woman who had just insulted not only him, but everything he represented. You could feel it in the silence. Something important was about to happen. Something real. Judge Caprio spoke slowly, every word measured. Miss Ashford, you've shown disrespect not just to me, but to this court and to everyone who believes in fairness. You came here for a simple traffic citation. Now, we must talk about character. He sat down again, calm but sharp. Bailiff, ensure the defendant remains in the courtroom. We'll review her case thoroughly. Victoria straightened, tried to act unbothered. But for the first time, there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. The judge picked up the folder before him. Miss Ashford, we have traffic camera footage of the incident. Let's review it together. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the monitor flickered to life. Everyone turned toward the screen. There it was, a silver Mercedes-Benz speeding through a red light on Benefit Street. The timestamp read 3:15 p.m. The video showed a crossing guard holding a bright stop sign, children standing on the sidewalk, and a man stepping onto the crosswalk. Then, in a blur of silver and noise, Victoria's car shot past, missing the elderly man by inches. Gasps filled the room. The man on the screen stumbled backward. A woman in a yellow vest pulled two children away, just in time. Judge Caprio's voice was calm, but carried fire. That crossing guard's name is Rebecca Martinez. The man you almost struck is 76-year-old Thomas Wu, a retired postal worker. The two children behind him were Rebecca's daughter and nephew. Her nephew has cerebral palsy. If she hadn't reacted in that second, we'd be talking about lives lost. The courtroom stayed silent. Not a sound, not a whisper. Victoria swallowed hard but kept her chin lifted. Your Honor, I didn't see clearly. The sun was in my eyes. It was a split-second decision. Judge Caprio pressed a button, replaying the footage in slow motion. Miss Ashford, the light had been red for 3 full seconds before you entered the intersection. The crossing guard was clearly visible. The children were visible. And according to the data, you were driving 52 miles per hour in a 25 zone. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The prosecutor stepped forward. Your Honor, Mrs. Martinez is here today. She wishes to testify. Judge Caprio nodded. Please, Mrs. Martinez, take the stand. A woman in her 40s rose from the gallery, still wearing her crossing guard uniform. Her eyes were tired but strong. When she sat down, she folded her hands and took a deep breath. Your Honor, she began softly, I've been a crossing guard for 12 years. I've seen impatient drivers, but I'll never forget that day. Her voice trembled slightly. I had my stop sign raised. Mr. Wu was crossing slowly. My daughter and nephew were waiting behind me. Then I saw that Mercedes coming fast, way too fast. I could tell it wasn't going to stop. I screamed for Mr. Wu to move, but he's old, he couldn't run. I had to grab him and my kids. If I hadn't, someone would have died right there. The courtroom was silent, except for a few muffled sobs. Mrs. Martinez wiped her eyes. People think traffic tickets are small things. But when you drive like that near a school, it's not a ticket. It's a miracle that no one dies. Judge Caprio nodded, his own voice softer now. Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. Your courage and quick action saved lives. You may step down. Then his gaze turned back to Victoria. Miss Ashford, you heard her. Do you have anything to say? Victoria's tone was tight, defensive. I'm sorry she was frightened, but nothing actually happened. Everyone is fine. We're talking about what could have happened, not what did happen. Gasps rippled again. The audience couldn't believe what they were hearing. Her voice was cold, almost annoyed, like this was still an inconvenience to her. You can't punish me for something that didn't happen, she continued. The video shows I ran a red light. That's it. This drama is unnecessary. Judge Caprio leaned forward, eyes sharp. Drama? Mrs. Martinez risked her life to save others. You nearly hit an elderly man and 2 children, and you call it drama? The judge paused, letting her words echo around the room until they sounded hollow even to her. Then he added quietly, You say you create jobs, Miss Ashford. Let's see what kind of contribution you truly make to this city. The prosecutor handed over another folder. Your Honor, public records show that Miss Ashford's company, Ashford Properties, is currently facing several lawsuits. 3 from employees for unpaid wages and 4 from tenants for unsafe living conditions. Victoria's face froze. Those are false claims, frivolous lawsuits. My lawyers are handling them. But the judge continued, his voice calm but stern. These documents also show 17 building code violations in your properties. Non-working smoke detectors, water damage, electrical hazards, families living in danger. He looked up directly into her eyes. You say you help this city, but your record shows you endanger it, in business and on the road. Victoria's voice shook. We fixed those problems. My company corrected them. For the first time, Judge Caprio raised his voice slightly. After how long? After how many families lived in fear? You had the power to fix it sooner, just like you had the power to stop at that red light. His words landed like thunder, slow, clear, and heavy. The prosecutor added one more piece. Your Honor, Miss Ashford's license also shows 2 prior suspensions. One for too many violations, another for failure to appear in court. Both resolved through her attorney. Victoria snapped back. That's what lawyers are for. I don't have time to sit in courtrooms all day. Judge Caprio stood once again. His presence filled the room. No, Miss Ashford, lawyers represent you. They don't replace your responsibility. You've lived believing money protects you. But in this courtroom, money protects no one. He took a breath, then announced firmly, for running a red light in a school zone and endangering lives, your fine will be raised to the maximum allowed by law. $2,500. Victoria's mouth dropped open. $2, $500 for a red light? That's ridiculous. But he wasn't finished. Your driver's license is suspended for 6 months. During that time, you will complete 80 hours of community service at Hasbro Children's Hospital, where you'll meet the children whose lives were once in danger because of drivers like you. You will also complete a 40-hour defensive driving course, in person, not online. The courtroom erupted with murmurs. Some nodded, some cried quietly. For once, even Victoria was speechless. Judge Caprio leaned forward one last time. And for your disrespect, for calling this court meaningless, I'm holding you in contempt. That's another $1,000 fine plus court costs. Your total today is $3,950. Victoria's voice was shaking now. You can't suspend my license. I need to drive for my business. How will I get to work? The judge didn't blink. The same way millions of people do, Miss Ashford. Take the bus. Use a taxi. Or walk. Maybe you'll finally see the people you claim to serve. Her face turned pale. The confidence was gone. He looked at her calmly and said, You asked what I do, Miss Ashford. I'll make sure that for a few hours each day in this courtroom, your money means nothing. Here, everyone is equal before the law. Then he lifted his gavel. That is justice. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Sharp, final, unforgettable. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. It wasn't just for Judge Caprio. It was for the truth, the kind of truth that still matters. The sound of the gavel still echoed when Victoria stood frozen in place. Her expensive heels no longer made her feel tall. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to collect her thoughts. For the first time that morning, her voice didn't carry power, it carried fear. She whispered, Your Honor, this can't be real. You can't do this to me. Judge Caprio looked at her calmly. Miss Ashford, justice isn't about what I can or can't do. It's about what's right. And this is right. The bailiff stepped closer, handing her the papers for her fines and suspension. Victoria's eyes darted across the page, as if looking for a mistake that would save her. But there was none. The courtroom sat still, watching the fall of arrogance unfold in front of them. It was no longer about a ticket. It was about humanity. As she turned to leave, her handbag brushed against the bench. The diamonds on her wrist shimmered, but they looked meaningless now. Wealth had never felt so small. Her eyes met Mrs. Martinez's, the crossing guard who had nearly watched tragedy unfold. Rebecca's gaze wasn't angry. It was heavy with pity. That look stung more than any fine ever could. Victoria's steps slowed. She hesitated. For the first time, it seemed she wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe just silence, but no words came out. Mr. Chin, the veteran, watched her too. His cap sat proudly on his head. When she looked his way, he gave a small nod, not of forgiveness, but of truth. The kind of truth that says you did this, and you must face it. She left the courtroom quietly, the click of her heels fading down the hallway. The next morning, the story spread like wildfire. Headlines read, Millionaire humbled by Judge Caprio. Respect over riches in Providence courtroom. Clips from the courtroom began circulating online. Millions watched, replaying the moment where arrogance met accountability. Comment after comment praised the judge for standing firm. But not everyone was cheering. Victoria sat alone in her office, blinds closed, phone buzzing nonstop. Reporters wanted statements. Clients wanted answers. Investors wanted distance. She stared at her reflection in the glass wall. The woman who once thought she was untouchable now looked tired, smaller somehow. A soft knock came on her office door. Her assistant, Melissa, peeked in. "Ma'am, the hospital called. They said you're scheduled to begin your community service next week." Victoria sighed, setting down her coffee. "Community service," she said it as if the words were foreign. Melissa hesitated. "They said you'll be working in the children's ward." For the first time in days, Victoria didn't respond with pride or sarcasm. She just nodded, quietly. The following Monday, Victoria arrived at Hasbro Children's Hospital. No designer dress this time, no diamond earrings, just a plain blue volunteer shirt and a badge that read community service worker. As she walked through the hallways, the sound of laughter mixed with beeping machines. Children in wheelchairs smiled as nurses passed by. Parents sat by hospital beds, holding tiny hands that fought every day for life. A nurse named Olivia greeted her. "You must be Victoria. Welcome. Today you'll be helping us with meal delivery." Victoria nodded. Of course. It sounded simple, but when she began walking through those rooms, she realized this was no easy task. Every room told a story of pain, hope, and strength. She met a little boy named Daniel, 8 years old, recovering from an accident. His leg was wrapped in thick white plaster, and he smiled through the pain. "Are you the new lady who brings snacks?" he asked. Victoria smiled softly. "Yes, that's me." "Cool," he said. "Thank you for the juice. My mom says people who help here are heroes." The words hit her heart like a slow burn. Heroes. For years, she'd called herself a boss, a leader, a builder, but never a hero. She walked out of Daniel's room slower than before. Her eyes were wet, but she wiped them quickly, pretending it was nothing. As days passed, she began learning small lessons. How to listen, how to wait, how to smile without control or agenda. One day, she was assigned to the therapy room, helping kids practice walking after surgery. She handed small toys, picked up crayons from the floor, and listened to stories that felt heavier than anything money could fix. A young girl named Maya looked up at her and said, "Miss Victoria, did you ever do something bad?" The question froze her. She wanted to say no, to protect her image, but this little girl's innocent eyes wouldn't allow it. "Yes," Victoria whispered. "I did something bad. I didn't think about others, and it hurt people." Maya nodded simply. "Then you could be good now." That one line broke something open inside her. That night, Victoria sat alone in her car outside the hospital. She didn't start the engine. She just sat there and cried, quietly, deeply. The kind of cry that doesn't come from shame, but realization. She finally understood what Judge Caprio had tried to teach her. That true success isn't about control or wealth. It's about respect, kindness, and the courage to admit when you're wrong. By the end of her service, something in her had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had stormed into that courtroom weeks ago. She was quieter now, humbler, and, for the first time in years, human again. When her final day arrived, she brought a box of toys and books for the children. Daniel hugged her tightly. "Bye, Miss Victoria. Don't forget to visit." She smiled, tears glistening. "I won't, Daniel. I promise." A week later, Victoria returned to court, not in defiance this time, but with gratitude. She stood before Judge Caprio, holding proof of her completed service. He looked at her carefully. "Miss Ashford, you've completed your hours?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said softly, "and I learned more than I ever expected." Judge Caprio smiled slightly. "I hope you found the lesson worthwhile." Victoria nodded. "I did. Thank you for making me see." The judge's expression softened. "Then this court is satisfied. Case closed." She left the courtroom, but this time, no one needed to clap. Her redemption was silent, and that silence was enough. A few days after her final court appearance, Victoria sat quietly in her home office. No phone calls, no meetings, no noise. The city lights sparkled outside her window, but for the first time, she didn't see numbers or deals. She saw people. Her assistant Melissa knocked softly. "Ma'am, the news channel wants to interview you. They're calling your story The Caprio Redemption." Victoria smiled faintly. "No, Melissa, I think I'll pass this time." The woman who once chased headlines now wanted peace more than attention. She opened her laptop, not to check her company's stocks, but to write an email. It was addressed to Mrs. Martinez, the crossing guard who had saved lives and spoken truth without anger. She wrote slowly, choosing each word with care. Dear Mrs. Martinez, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you gratitude. You saved a life that day, maybe more than one. I thought money made me powerful, but you reminded me what true strength looks like. Thank you for teaching me what real responsibility means. When she hit send, she felt lighter, like she'd set something right in the world, even if it was just one small piece. That same week, Victoria quietly arranged for new safety equipment to be installed at every school zone near her properties. Fresh signs, brighter lights, stronger barriers. She didn't call the media, didn't post it online. She just did it. A month later, Mrs. Martinez received a donation letter in the mail. It was from Ashford Properties, funding new safety training for school crossing guards across Providence. Rebecca smiled, whispering, "Looks like she finally learned." Meanwhile, in his courtroom, Judge Frank Caprio continued his daily work, case after case, person after person. He'd seen all: laughter, tears, arrogance, regret. But something about the Ashford case stayed with him. When the courtroom was empty one afternoon, his clerk asked softly, "Judge, that woman, Victoria Ashford, do you really think she changed?" Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "You know," he said with a small smile, "justice isn't just about punishment. It's about opportunity, the chance for someone to see themselves clearly. I believe she did." He looked out the window toward the Providence skyline. Sometimes the law teaches lessons no one else can, and sometimes those lessons last forever. Later that evening, Victoria visited Hasbro Children's Hospital again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. When she walked into the children's ward, a nurse smiled. "Back again, Miss Victoria?" She laughed softly. "You could just call me Victoria." Daniel, the little boy with the cast, waved from across the room. "You came back. I told you I would," she said warmly. She spent hours there, helping with art projects, reading stories, handing out snacks. But most of all, she listened, to laughter, to courage, to hope. Every time a child smiled at her, she felt something grow inside her, something stronger than pride: peace. One afternoon, as she packed up to leave, she overheard a parent talking to another. "That's the woman from the Judge Caprio video," the mother whispered. "She's different now. You can see it in her eyes." Victoria heard it but didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Those words were enough. Weeks turned into months. Victoria's suspension period ended, but she didn't rush to get her license back. She'd started walking to work, the same streets she once sped through without care. She passed people she'd never noticed before: janitors, students, parents holding their kids' hands. She smiled at them now. Sometimes they smiled back. One morning, she stopped at a crosswalk and saw Mrs. Martinez on duty again. "Good morning, Rebecca," Victoria said. Mrs. Martinez smiled, holding up her stop sign. "Good morning, Victoria. Nice to see you walking." They both laughed softly. No tension, no anger. Just two women who had both learned something from that one terrible day. That same week, the local newspaper printed a small story tucked away on page 6. Headline: "Former Businesswoman Funds Children's Safety Program." No quotes, no interviews, just a quiet story about a changed life making a difference. Judge Caprio saw it while drinking his morning coffee. He smiled to himself and said softly, "Looks like she finally understood." At court later that day, a young man stood before him, nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to another. He'd been caught speeding. "Your Honor," he said nervously, "I'm sorry. I was late for work. I didn't mean to break the law." Judge Caprio leaned forward kindly. "What do you do for work, son?" "Construction, sir." "That's hard work," the judge replied, "and I respect that. But safety must always come before speed. You remind me of someone who once thought time was more important than people. Trust me, it's not." The young man nodded, humbled. And somewhere deep inside, Judge Caprio felt gratitude, because he knew the message was spreading. The lesson wasn't just about Victoria anymore. It was about everyone who watched, everyone who learned that day that respect, kindness, and humility still matter. That night, Victoria sat in her living room, watching the city lights flicker. She wasn't thinking about deals or deadlines anymore. She was thinking about purpose. For the first time, she picked up her phone, not to scroll or send orders, but to record a message. She looked directly into the camera and said softly, "If you've ever thought you were too important to follow the rules, let me tell you you're not. I learned that the hard way. Judge Caprio didn't punish me. He saved me. Respect others, drive safely, and never forget that life isn't about what you earn. It's about who you become." She posted it online without any hashtags, without any captions. Just truth. Within hours, the video went viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. People commented, "This changed how I drive. I needed to hear this today. Judge Caprio is the hero we need." Victoria read every comment quietly, tears in her eyes, not from shame, but from gratitude. Months passed, but the memory of that courtroom never left Victoria Ashford's heart. Sometimes she still heard the sound of Judge Caprio's gavel echoing in her mind, not as punishment, but as a reminder. Every time she saw a red light now, she stopped, fully, quietly, respectfully. She waited, not just for traffic, but for reflection. Because now she knew, a red light isn't just a rule. It's a pause that saves lives. One rainy afternoon, as she walked down Benefit Street, the same road where everything had begun, she saw something that made her stop. Across the street, little kids were crossing under colorful umbrellas. The crossing guard raised her stop sign, and cars waited patiently. Victoria stood there watching, her heart full. She thought about what might have happened that day, and how 1 second of arrogance almost destroyed everything. A small boy tripped in the rain, dropping his backpack. Without thinking, Victoria rushed across and picked it up for him. "Here you go, sweetheart. Be careful," she said softly. The boy smiled. "Thank you." And in that tiny moment, it felt like something inside her finally healed. Later that evening, she drove again for the first time in months. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the steering wheel. Every turn, every signal, every brake meant something new. She wasn't just a driver now. She was a guardian of every life around her. As she stopped at another light, she looked up and whispered, "Thank you, Judge Caprio." It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about growth. Meanwhile, back in Providence Municipal Court, the day carried on as usual. The waiting room was full, people nervous, embarrassed, hopeful. Judge Caprio entered the courtroom, greeted by smiles and nods. The bailiff whispered, "Another busy day, Your Honor." Judge Caprio smiled kindly. Every day is a chance to make someone better, not just punish them. He began hearing cases: a young student, an elderly woman, a single father. Each story different, but each treated with the same respect. And every time he said, "Good morning," it carried more than politeness. It carried purpose. That night, as he prepared to leave, he glanced at the small television in his office. A local channel was playing a community feature titled "From Contempt to Compassion," the Victoria Ashford story. He paused, listening quietly. The reporter said, "After a courtroom encounter that went viral, Victoria Ashford has turned her experience into a movement promoting safe driving and civic kindness. Her foundation, the Red Light Project, now provides awareness programs for schools across Rhode Island." Judge Caprio smiled, a proud, quiet smile, and turned off the screen. He didn't need the praise. The result was enough. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the courthouse. It was handwritten in elegant script. "Dear Judge Caprio, you once told me that justice is not about money or power. It's about humanity. I understand that now. Because of you, I found purpose again. Because of you, I learned what it means to care. Thank you for giving me a second chance to be someone better." With respect and gratitude, Victoria Ashford. Judge Caprio read it slowly, his eyes softening. He folded the letter gently and placed it in his drawer, the same drawer where he kept thank you notes from people he'd helped over the years. He whispered to himself, "That's why I do this." As the sun set over Providence, the courthouse lights glowed warmly through the windows. Outside, cars passed quietly, obeying every signal. People walked safely across streets. The city felt calm, almost peaceful. And somewhere, Victoria stood at another crosswalk, holding her umbrella, waiting for the light to turn green. The rain tapped gently on her shoulders. She smiled, not the proud, polished smile of a millionaire, but the simple, grateful smile of a woman who had finally learned the meaning of justice. The narrator's voice closes softly. In a world where money often speaks louder than morals, Judge Frank Caprio reminded us that true justice cannot be bought, that respect is earned through humility, that second chances can heal even the proudest hearts, and that sometimes the most powerful sentence isn't punishment, it's change. If this story moved your heart-red heart, don't leave without hitting like right now. Comment hashtag Justice Lives here if you believe every courtroom should teach not just law, but life. And subscribe to stay part of stories that prove compassion is the strongest kind of justice. Because when respect meets accountability, that's not just law, that's humanity.